Welcome to From the Horse's Mouth, the South African Equestrian Federation's podcast bringing clarity to conversations within our sport. In equestrian sport, trust is essential. Trust between horse and rider, athlete and coach, and the National Federation and its members. Today's topic addresses that, and we're going to pay attention to what makes our sport an environment that is respectful, safe, and protected for all parties, but particularly children, young riders, and those that are vulnerable, and that is safeguarding. Safeguarding is a pertinent topic not only locally but globally, and it's going to ensure the current health of our sport but also the futurity of it. The SAEF instituted the safeguarding policy in 2021 and further updated it in 2023, putting in place processes, education initiatives, and the South African Equestrian Federation Safeguarding Action Team, which accurately addresses concerns around harassment, harm, abuse, and neglect. But what does this realistically mean? What are the processes? What happens when a complaint is filed? And what does our legal framework do, not only to ensure protection, but fairness? Today, we welcome Kathy Page in her safeguarding capacity and Peter Swanepoel as the legal oversight for the South African Equestrian Federation. This conversation brings transparency and clarity to the discussion, not only for the riders and coaches, but also for parents and officials, so that we can understand what the SAEF's role is in safeguarding, the reaches thereof, and how we can all play our part. Thank you so much to Kathy and Peter for joining us today.
Thank you, Georgie.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Kicking off, what does safeguarding mean specifically in the context of equestrian sport?
Well, as you said, it is providing a safe sport. That's the bottom line, for everybody to be able to enjoy their sport, come together, not have a problem of being bullied every day or having harassment from anybody, that it's a safe space for people to come in and to compete or just to ride.
Georgia, as I just add to that, that in the South Africa's constitution and the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, we have the Bill of Rights, and of course the Bill of Rights make a provision for that everybody's got an inherent dignity, and that dignity deserves protection. And also in the Bill of Rights we have the child's rights, so the protection of children's rights, which also provides that wherever children is involved in sport, it has to be, their best interests have to be predominantly considered. And then the Sports Recreation, the National Sports and Recreational Act clearly states that national federations of sport, like the South African Equestrian Federation, must assume responsibility for safety issues within the sport. And this
is actually a trickle down.
Yeah.
It's instituted by the national sporting body.
Yeah,
of South Africa.
So the safeguarding policy actually provide a framework for us to put that in practice, to put that into everyday equestrian life. It doesn't help us to have these legislation and these lofty ideals about protecting child's rights and vulnerable adult rights and the inherent dignity of people. But how do we do that in everyday sport? And that's what the safeguarding policy is pursuing to do. Yeah.
I'm imagining that there's also two channels for this to come through, and that's globally what's happening in equestrian sport.
Yes.
And we've seen the United States really being quite progressive in how they've quite aggressively championed this. And then, as you say, nationally, across all our sports,
yes,
that this is enforced.
And schools. It's included in school sport as well at all levels, and all schools have to implement safeguarding, and as do all
across
sporting
all
federations.
sports.
Across everything.
What prompted South African Equestrian Federation to formalise and adopt the safeguarding policy in 2021?
Well, it came down, as you say, from the global level through the Department of Sport, where all federations were advised they needed to put safeguarding into place in terms of procedures and how to act in the instant of children or vulnerable adults being at risk.
Yeah.
And how does the safeguarding policy protect? What are the cornerstones of it?
I want to say what it's not.
I think that's a great
because
place
I think,
to go.
yeah,
I think there is a lot of misconceptions around.
So let me say let me explain what safeguarding is not, because a lot of people get a bit confused around this. Safeguarding is not there to settle personal disputes amongst people at a yard. It's not there to settle issues they might have with a show holding body, or it might be something where a coach is saying the parent hasn't paid me and I want to put a safeguarding case against him. We don't do that. That is not what safeguarding is. Safeguarding is in place to protect riders, children, from harassment, abuse, bullying, as we've said, and to make it a place where people can go and enjoy their ride, whether it's competitively or recreational.
Can we get a handle, perhaps from you, Peter, on what defines harassment or abuse in this environment?
Yeah, as I said previously about the Bill of Rights, the safeguarding policy aims to protect the rights of the dignity and the rights of the equestrian community at large. Protects everyone in the community, both the riders as well as the pupils, as well as the officials as well. So it's really a framework for having a relationship between various different avenues of people within the sport that are respectful, and in that we have then the definitions. I mean, the policy is very clear about what abuse is and what harassment is. But the idea is that we would create a safe environment in terms of that we would have relationships where we protect, especially and focus, vulnerable relationships like children, and then also
where there's a power disparity.
Where there's a power imbalance or a differentiated, power differentiated relationship.
Sorry, and you did refer to the policy that is on the SAEF's website.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
It's available.
How does safeguarding differ from general disciplinary or grievance procedures?
Yeah, so I think that it differs quite a lot, because normally in terms of a normal grievance that we receive, it would be handled. I am the legal officer, so I would have investigate that matter and then decide whether it would be referred to the Judicial Commission, the JC as we call it, and that would follow a normal procedure. And the adjudication of that is based on violation of our code of conduct or our rules and our regulations within the sport. When somebody register as an individual or a member with South African Equestrian Federation, they sign a form basically that says they
a code of conduct.
A code of conduct that they submit to the rules of South African Equestrian Federation. And if then there's a complaint or a violation, we investigate it, and that is then referred to the Judicial Commission if we think that it should be pursued further and that sanctions should be given. But with safeguarding, it's quite different. We normally receive somebody that's concerned, a whistleblower, that's concerned about a relationship, that there is inappropriate behavior, and it deems investigation. So we'll investigate that. A safeguarding officer will investigate that. There is the safeguarding case management team, of which Kathy and I are members, and then what will happen is the safeguarding officer will investigate that and bring that to the case management team, who will then decide if the matter should be referred to the JC for disciplinary. So there could be disciplinary proceedings following from a safeguarding complaint, but it's not necessarily the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, you wanted to say something?
I think it was just on that in terms of when we investigate, and I don't want to jump ahead because I know we want to talk about that, but when we do investigate, we look at all angles as much as we can. But we're not private investigators, and we obviously talk to the parties involved, and we talk to the discipline if required. And we obviously accumulate all the information, but I think I don't want to jump ahead because I think I'm jumping ahead now. Sorry, on your question.
I'm sure we'll come back.
I might have to repeat myself.
The safeguarding officers.
In fact, what I did want to say was when you were saying about your code of conduct, when members sign up for a show or they sign up with their discipline, they tick all those little boxes that agree to the terms and conditions, code of conduct, etc. Not if they click on them, it will open up and they can read them. It's all available there. They are accepting all of those terms and conditions and code of conduct and safeguarding every time they enter a show. Sometimes just people forget that when they're doing, and then we get these instances that really are not appropriate, but they've forgotten what they've actually signed up for. And all members need to remember what they've signed for.
So I think you're speaking about shows. What kind of situations do fall under the umbrella of safeguarding? Because I know that this can also be yard applicable. It can be.
It doesn't have to be at a show. It doesn't have to be competitive. It can be happening something that it's happening between a coach and a rider at a yard, inappropriate behaviour. They've gone away necessarily for maybe a show away, like down out of the province, and they haven't maybe thought about it. It might not necessarily be safeguarding. It might be just a little bit inappropriate, but it covers all areas. It's not just at competitions.
So, Georgie, if I just may add there, just to give you clarification on exactly what issues we're dealing with is, firstly, when we're talking about safeguarding, we're specifically talking about something that probably is happening over a period of time, a prolonged period of time, a repeated violation of a lack of respect in a relationship where there's a power imbalance. So we will have a relationship between a pupil and an instructor, and there would be body shaming, and it will be over a period of time, up to a point that a pupil don't want to ride in class anymore because she's picked out or she's been shamed for being overweight. Okay. And then in that sense, going back to the Bill of Rights, her integrity and her dignity has been infringed, and that's what we're trying to protect. So it's not so much once-off offences of inappropriate behaviour.
When there's a dispute in a warm-up arena.
It's normally a period of time, and it's quite purposeful in that they're doing it ongoing.
Intentional, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're probably finding your show disputes are more, that would be escalated to the show holding body immediately, a complaint.
Or the discipline, yeah. Yeah, that's a personal dispute, and a lot of those that we do get, when we investigate, they're not safeguarding. Okay. And that's why I said in the beginning, it's important to know what is not safeguarding.
So that is, my next question is I had actually outlined it here, what kind of complaints do not fall within safeguarding specifically? So it would be these kind of like once-off altercations in a show environment, someone not riding left to left, or
someone having dispute in the warm-up arena, someone having a feeling that a judge, maybe judge them harshly because they've got personal issues, or somebody making a comment on the side of the arena about the way they rode. That's not safeguarding. That's code of conduct, it's behaviour, it's a number of things. But safeguarding is something that happens over time, and we're very often, 9 out of 10 times, the person involved, either being bullied, cyber bullied, pulls out of the sport. And that's an important factor.
We do see a large dropout, I would say.
And that's what you'd say is, that's where very often that has been safeguarding, or that's a specific thing that falls under safeguarding, because the situation has got so bad they don't want to be involved anymore. So they now rather pull away and not ride. And that's also part of we don't want to lose people out of the sport. And it's the same. I know I've dealt a lot with the schools in safeguarding. They've got the same situation where, particularly at high school level, a lot of the pupils stop doing a specific sport. And you would look at why they're stopping. And often it is because there's been repeated shaming or issues. And
that's interesting, because that's actually, that's on a totally parallel but separate discussion, is just bullying in schools, and I think that's a better analogy than these once-off disputes that we have.
And we have to talk about cyberbullying in this. I would say that the bullying actually is more cyber-based because the kids stay on social media. And it's not just to the kids. We get a lot of adults who are bullying each other on social media. It is a very real issue.
I would like to put everyone back who is listening to this podcast to an initial podcast that we did with Emma Sadler around cyberbullying and bullying in general. And I do think that it's incredibly important for parents and coaches to be aware of those things.
Yes. So if I'm just meant to add, when we look at the safeguarding policy, and even the sanctions later that we will probably discuss, is the aim for it is to guard against inappropriate situations or inappropriate relationships, or actions that become creates the environment where abuse can happen and then continue. So and that's the aim that where we want to protect vulnerable adults and children from instances of inappropriate behavior or poor practices are things like where instructor and a pupil go overseas to go buy a horse, and it's a minor and they share the same room, even though it's with parental consent. So the problem with that is it's not safeguarding, it's not a safeguarding violation as such, but it is the environment is created for abuse that could happen. So that's the poor practice that we would make as safeguarding, from the safeguarding point of view, would want to make the equestrian community aware of, that we have to challenge poor practices within the community. We have to challenge, everyone has to challenge these poor practices, whether it's the body shaming in the classes or whatever. So those are the sources, maybe, the altercations that could create the abuse or the bullying. And then when it comes to us and when we accept it as a safeguarding matter, it's now a full-fledged situation that's been going on for months, and it's been a psychological abuse over a period of time. So
psychological abuse and grooming.
Yes.
I think those are these.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes it's not intentional. It's necessarily, because the coach just hasn't necessarily given it some thought. But when you approach it and you put it forward to them like that, they look at you in horror, because they're like, it was
and
never.
I think this will be important with one of our upcoming podcasts, is speaking to Chad Cunningham, who's our head of the coaches, because I think coaching has changed dramatically over the last decade, where it's gone from being an instruction-based thing to a very integral relationship between the athlete and the
and small details, the coaches is like, well, I had this done to me as a child and I don't think it's a problem, so I'll just carry on doing it now. And things have changed. A pat on the bum sometimes to a kid getting on is taken the wrong way. And the coaches are appalled when the parents come and complain and they go, well, I didn't even thought twice. But it's because they haven't thought about it. And that's the education, the training that is required with coaches, to say what is now appropriate and what's not. And just because it was done 20 years ago doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to be doing it now.
I read a thing where someone said, well, when I was a kid, it was okay. We were given corporal punishments, so it's totally fine. And someone said, you're not fine. You're an adult who thinks it's okay to beat kids. That's not normal, So, and this was my next thing, and we are going back and forth a little bit. So just to be clear, safeguarding policy, I said here, it doesn't apply only at competitions. It applies, but it actually specifically more applies at home than at competitions, technically.
Yeah.
Yes, because that is the space that is repeated.
Okay.
All the time. And that's where it can become repeated behavior, and that becomes an issue.
Okay.
Because it's what the pupil takes with him from wherever the interaction or the relationship was, and I think that's the quintessential difference that makes a safeguarding matter and a non-safeguarding matter, is the intentionality. Because normally a once-off spat or a dispute or a inappropriate behavior, there's no intentionality for it to be bullying or to be harassment over a period of time. And it's normally have got a short-term harm, while your bullying and your harassment is a long-term psychological harm, which affect a person's whole being and their self-esteem and everything else. So, and those are the issues that we really want to get at.
So there's two, as when I'm thinking from a safeguarding intervention perspective here, there's obviously a power disparity dynamic, where you're dealing with coaches and athletes, or even adults at a yard bullying younger, and then there's a peer level that happens as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone believes the safeguarding issue exists, or if someone has a safeguarding issue, what is the first step that they should take?
So there's a number of things that they can do. On the SAEF website is the link to the Guardian. The Guardian app is what we all use as the official reporting tool for safeguarding.
We did interview Mark Hardwick about that initially, I think, when we launched.
So it is still in place. It is done anonymously if you choose. Okay. You do not have to put details on. I have done a number of cases where I don't know who the original person was that put the case forward, but on investigation we found more information, and if they choose to stay anonymous, they can remain anonymous.
Can you effectively escalate something if people remain anonymous? I know this has been one of the issues, and Mark did point it out, is that if you want to progress, you do need to take evidence. You do.
It is difficult. It is difficult because my experience has been, I'll go back to the original complaint and say, yes, we can take it on, yes, we feel there's something in this, are you willing to come in and do an affidavit? And sometimes it takes them a little time to get around it, but again, we will say to them, you will do that affidavit in a confidential manner. It's done with us one-on-one in the office. It doesn't have to be done here. It can be done anyway. I can send it to them and they can do it themselves. People need to feel the confidence that they're going to be protected if they're giving in some information.
And that they have an opportunity to protect others, which I think is...
And to be taken seriously, because there are times that they will say, oh, I raised it with somebody, but it was dismissed as not being seen as important, depending who it is. And that's normally what I would put into our category of vulnerable adults, which is what we've seen. Youngsters between the ages of 18 and sort of 23, 24, they're still quite young. They haven't quite learned the art of saying no, or they haven't learned the art of being able to...
We all want to impress a coach or a
100%.
trainer at some point.
So even though they are adults, they are still very vulnerable to certain things. So they might be the one they're a bit hesitant. They don't want to come in, they don't want to create a scene, but they want to be heard. The second part of that might be that we get youngsters who might put it on a safeguarding complaint on the Guardian. They don't want to do it, but they will forward information that I can go and look at under social media. Okay. And they'll say, this person's been bullied by this person. I don't know, yes. And then they will give it. And and I'd like to talk more about cyberbullying just now as a separate point, because every parent that I have dealt with tells me my child will never cyberbully because they know not to. And 9 out of 10 times they are.
There's a lot of confidence behind that anonymity, I think, of a screen.
But we can touch on that one. But that's the first point. You can go in via the Guardian. You can do it online via your phone on the app. You can do it via the SAEF website. If you want to download, you can do it there. If you don't want to go via the app, you can make a call. You can send us an email. My email address is National Safeguarding is there. Okay. And they can send an email. They can give us all the details and we'll follow up from there.
And what happens once a safeguarding report is submitted? What are the next steps internally for you?
Okay, so I will look at it initially and determine and go through the details, try and get as much information. Often I will go back to the person to try and get the full picture.
And can you, I think via the Guardian, you can communicate with them.
Yes, so I can be in contact with them even if I don't know who they are. Okay. So that does, because I'll go back and say, have you got any other evidence? Is anything else? Was anybody else involved? Just to try and get some more information. We then sit we have a case management team within the SAEF that's made up of several of us, where we put it on forward and we look at it and say, is this safeguarding or is it a code of conduct? And we'll address it accordingly on that matter. Okay.
What is the role of the safeguarding action team? What is this the team that I'm looking at? No.
We have one more
okay.
that joins us. Who comes in with a lot of experience as well, because sometimes people get a bit confused. Horse welfare is not safeguarding.
Okay.
And sometimes those things will come in and it's a combination. So, in terms of dealing with horse welfare, we'll look at that too, but deal with it separately because that is not under safeguarding. Okay. And we will then assess it. And if it is safeguarding, then what I would do is, depending where it is in the country, if we've got a trained safeguarding officer in that province, we will ask for interviews with the people.
Do we still have provinces that need safeguarding officers?
And disciplines.
Okay.
And we are in the process of getting people trained up.
So should every discipline have a safeguarding officer?
Every province and every discipline within that province should have a safeguarding officer.
So if people want to get involved, can they reach out?
Yes, they can.
And get,
Yes, they can. We are putting people through training. The SAEF does pay for it. Okay. It's really just your time. But if they're doing the training, they need to be prepared to stand as the safeguarding officer for that discipline or for that province.
And is there a relationship then between the athlete's rep for discipline associations, and the safeguarding officer? Or is this a totally standalone?
No, ultimately that's where we need to go. We need to have an understanding, and we have done it the same with the coaches. That ultimately we like to get the coaches who are involved, and certainly coaches of the national teams are put on a safeguarding course before the teams might travel.
Because all coaches will need to go on.
Ultimately, that's where, and obviously that's a process because it does take time. Okay. But we're not quite at that level yet.
I just want to go a little bit back in terms of the procedure that we follow.
Sorry.
So if at the moment Kathy is a safeguarding the National Safeguarding Officer. So she's taking the brunt of the work, and she'd investigate the matter, and she'd investigate it by also approaching the person that has been accused or the allegations has been made against. We will approach that person and ask for them to provide their version of the incident, and that person obviously has the right to not cooperate or to cooperate. If they don't cooperate, the matter would then be concluded there, and Kathy would bring it to the safeguarding management team or the case management team. And we as a team would then decide whether this matter is substantiated, whether the allegations are substantiated, and then we will just forward it to the Judicial Commission, who will then make their own assessment of the facts, and then it proceeds like a proper disciplinary proceeding, where they will have a full-on sort of trial, call in witnesses and that kind of thing. And that's why where it's necessary for the anonymity. Anonymity is fine when it's a whistleblower, but when we start having to have witnesses.
I suppose it's also to protect the coaches, because there could be somebody
again, that exactly what I wanted to, yes.
out to
and that's a part,
destroy reputation.
Yeah, that's part of. If we find that the matter is not, or if it's unsubstantiated, we leave it there. But we can also find that the matter is malicious, and that's why we also want to protect, like you say, malicious allegations, and that's why confidentiality is obviously very, very important.
It's a double-edged sword, I suppose, the confidentiality.
It's very important, and that's the first thing I always look at when I get the case or the complaint. The first thing we try and look at is to try and, there's always two sides to the story. And we are always trying to find out what the backstory is, if I use that term, because often there is a backstory that's got nothing to do with equestrian. It's a private issue, or, and now they've decided that they're going to out their coach on something. And when we look and do a proper investigation, it's totally unsubstantiated and it's unfair. So
that's really sad, because it's such a wonderful platform for the people who need it.
Yes.
And you often find that abuse means that the platform doesn't get used by the people who actually need it.
And that's why we do, initially when people do put a complaint in, the first thing that we look at, is it a minor? Are they in danger? Do we need to look at getting the police involved? And if it's not that, then to try and sort of sift through, because often it's quite an emotional message that's been sent through. And you want to try and say, okay, what are the actual facts?
Let's take that out. Out of interest, could coaches be reporting parents?
They have. Okay. We have had an incident of that where, there was a situation where the parent enforced the child to ride, and the coach was saying, "Don't think this is. Just leave it. Let's take it back a step." And parents were adamant, and they didn't. We had to have a discussion around it. It wasn't a big case at the time, but it was a discussion we had with the parents, and just saying, you just need to be aware that your child is a minor, and why are you forcing them to ride if they don't want to?
It's such an expensive sport. Don't do it. It's like forcing your child to buy Gucci. Like, really, it's a terrible idea. I think
you will enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, for someone like me, I'm like, oh, please, can I be abused by those parents? But no, I'm joking. That's. I think we've just touched on that. But how does SAEF ensure that both the complainant and the respondent are treated fairly? And I think you've kind of covered that. So you do investigate thoroughly.
When we do our investigations or we do interviews, they are done separately. We don't do them on the same day, even with one, in case that they see each other. They are done totally separately, and they are. The first thing often the accused person will say is, "Do I need to bring an attorney?" And they don't. They can if they want to, but we are just doing an investigation. We are not accusing them of anything. We are just saying, we've received this. We are now obliged to investigate because this is what we've been told. So they will sometimes come with an attorney. Sometimes they'll come in and they sometimes don't even know about the allegation. So it's a case, everybody gets their fair shot, if I want to say it like that, before we even look at it, at the next level.
And it's never a one-person process, it goes through a lot of checks and balances, and it's not us, even safeguarding, that enforces the policy at the end of the day. We implement it and we do the investigation, but then eventually we refer it to the Judicial Commission that is actually having a proper...
Okay, so the pathway would probably be safeguarding officer, then it would come to safeguarding national.
Case management team.
Okay, so then the action team investigates, and then from there you pass it on to the JC.
JC.
Okay.
with any recommendations or not.
Yeah, we'll
required.
recommend sanctions. We'll recommend if it's a risk. That's another thing that I just think is very important for us to mention, is that as safeguarding officer and the safeguarding policy, our duty is to assess the risk of this continuing to happen and happening to other people in the sport. So what we would want to do is educate and make people aware, but also put in safeguards against this happening. And then that's where it comes in, making coaches aware and parents aware and pupils aware about bad practices, poor practices and best practices, and educate, you know.
So the education does form quite a large part of your... And where can people access this education? Are there ongoing workshops? Is it something that's available online?
So we have done workshops in the past. We are looking this year at doing like a mini roadshow to try and educate people. And again, we're saying to people, reach out. If you're not sure, ask us. It doesn't have to be a formal complaint, but whether it's myself or the officers that are out in and around the country, and that is our focus, to try and get as many people trained up to be those officers, so that you can pick up the phone to somebody and say, I've seen this or I've heard about this, I'm concerned. Is this safeguarding? Is it not? Unfortunately, the nature of it is that people get very emotional and they, oh my word, I've seen something and now this is, you know, it's a safeguarding. And when we start to unpack it a little bit, it's just two people who had an argument at a yard. And maybe raise their voices at each other, and that's not safeguarding. And so we would dismiss that.
What are some of the safeguarding red flags, if I can put it that way, that you would go, this isn't a dispute, this is a safeguarding issue? So you've already mentioned prolonged time period as being one of them. Multiple complaints would be another, I imagine. What are some of the other things that differentiate it as a safeguarding issue?
Cyberbullying. Okay. It's a very, very real, very big thing that is happening. And as I said, you know, a lot of parents will tell you there's absolutely no way. My child has been educated about it. They've been to school, they've listened to Emma Sadler, they know that it's not the right thing to do. And I would challenge most parents and say, well, I'll probably guess that your child doesn't only have one Instagram handle. They've got what they call their spam accounts, and they're under other names, and they often are anonymous. So the parents won't know about it, guaranteed. Because it doesn't come up under their name, it's under another name. And they use those accounts to bully other riders. Or they will put, the stuff I have seen is appalling, the things that they would say.
Would you say that's accounted for the majority of your bullying issues?
No, it's about it's probably about 50% at the moment. Okay. And certainly, and unfortunately it's quite strong in a lot of areas amongst the juniors. We get a few with the adults, but it tends to be the teenagers. You know, social media is easy to hide behind, and it's easy to use your spam account. It's an anonymous name. You can post a photo of somebody and say, what an awful rider, I think she's terrible, I wish her horse would die. You know, and it's not just once, they're doing it time and time again, to the point that the kid then goes, I don't want to ride anymore. And I had a case last year where the mother contacted us and said, I'm suspecting my child being bullied, but I can't find the evidence. And she won't talk about it, but she won't ride. She won't go to the yard. She stopped competing. She pulled out of a number of things. And when we investigated, and I said to Mum, go and look to see if there's spam accounts. And what we found was awful. And all of them were under 16. They were all 13, 14.
It's really interesting how this all ties together. So like the coach's education, this is a pivotal part of it. As we said, the online space, you know, which we've discussed with Emma, and the safeguard.
Social
I mean,
media,
there's a massive overlap.
There is. And sometimes the coaches, again, especially if they're younger coaches, they're online, they see stuff, the kids post things, they might comment about it. They're not always aware of doing it. And sometimes, without even realizing, they've forwarded something to the other kids in the yard. And we might have a bit of a laugh about it, but the person that's involved is sitting there feeling completely humiliated because it was about them. Even though their name might not have been used, they know it's about them. These kids aren't stupid, they know exactly. And so it's very difficult because the people doing it will go, but I didn't say anything, I didn't use her name. And
or sometimes it's, you know, I mean, there's lots of things going around on TikTok, and you know, where it's funny, and the coaches openly, yes, you know, and it's very open, and it doesn't seem to be malicious,
And they
yeah,
forward it, and they've made a meme out of it, and then they forward that
goes
to
a
the
little
other.
bit viral.
Yes, or they put it onto their WhatsApp group, you know, at the yard, and everybody has a good laugh about it. But the person who it's involved in, even though that their name wasn't there, they know it's about them. And that constant kind of mocking, you know, becomes a form of safeguarding and becomes a form of bullying.
On the process discussion, Peter, once we've gone from, so there's been a complaint lodged, it's been investigated, it's either then been mediated and resolved, essentially, or it's been escalated to JSC. What are the ultimate outcomes for people who are on the wrong side of this?
Yeah, so the sanctions can be quite varied, from just a warning letter that watch out, you know, this is a poor practice. Maybe you have to do a risk assessment of your yard and see what's going on there so that you can avoid something much worse happening down the line. So we can say that we can send a warning letter, it can be a fine, it can be actual suspension from the Equestrian Federation, and it can be a life suspension if we're talking about things like sexual harassment and sexual abuse. And that's one of the things that I would also flag that's very prevalent, and that we have to do a lot, is the power imbalance between the coaches and young girls, and that's something that comes up, and boys as well. Yeah, it comes up again and again. You know, it's just so important for coaches to maintain that professional relationship. And as soon as there's games with sexual innuendo or alcohol or things like that, there's that breaking down of the barrier between pupil and coach. And so those things are much more serious, and those things definitely the Judicial Commission will look into suspension for a certain period of time. We also can recommend suspension of just certain activities for coaches, limiting their rights in terms of coaches and
like they can't be a junior coach, they can't.
Yeah, or don't coach without even somebody there, or whatever the situation is. So that's the type of thing that we can and want to enforce. So we will do that in the future. But it's important to realize that it's all in terms of educating, you know, and protecting. Again,
I suppose this is again why it's so important for everything to be an ecosystem, is because it's incredibly hard to enforce penalties on a coach if they're not part of a regulated coaching system.
Exactly, and you don't want to take away. I mean, we can suspend and then take away somebody's livelihood, and we don't want to do that. So there are ways that we could work around that in terms of protecting the coach himself or herself.
So this would effectively operate almost as the NPA of the equestrian world, and then you liaise with the National Federation, who enforces it through the discipline associations.
Yeah, safeguarding would probably not be enforced through the disciplines, because that comes straight to the National Federation. So they won't be involved. There's also one of the things that's different between a normal procedure. When you've got a normal disciplinary procedure, normally the SAEF won't even touch it until it's gone through the discipline.
Yes,
with safeguarding,
it's the other way around.
with safeguarding, it doesn't have to go through the discipline.
From a legal perspective, how does safeguarding balance protection with procedural fairness? We have obviously touched on this briefly. Does it really lie in the investigation and this is where we would urge coaches, or I don't want to say accused parties, that sounds very aggressive, but to be part of the discussion and the solution?
Yeah, I think the most important way that we do that is because it's going through a process, you know, and it's going through a fair process where somebody who's the allegations have been made against will have the opportunity also to provide their side of the story. Unfortunately, sometimes the protection part of that is that it needs swift action. So we need a swift sort of process.
Rather err on the side of safety.
Yeah. So what we do have and what we can use as a mechanism, but we won't really use it unless it's an extreme situation, is that the safeguarding case management team, in conjunction with the SAEF Secretary General, can make a provisional suspension. You know, if we are suspecting that there's ongoing sexual abuse or sexual harassment or something, there's cyberbullying or something, and there is a situation where we have to make a suspension of a member
And you could suspend a junior as well, just to be clear. So
we could suspend
Any member.
basically any registered individual that's registered with SAEF for pending the matter to be resolved. That may be appealed, that person may be appealed, it's been suspension to the JC and immediately have that suspension uplifted. We are not we're not the final authority, the JC is, so they'll come and make a final decision on it. But that is a way we can protect while the process is taking its course and the matter is taking its course. So there is sort of trying to do that, but I would say that the process is fair enough, for for the outcome to be fair for both parties.
I'm aware that this is almost more of a philosophical, question, but when it comes to instances where, and it is a problem that we have in South Africa, where we have unregistered coaches and unregistered individuals.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know what is this is obviously a call to arms for everyone to be registered with SAEF. There are so many benefits to being an SAEF registered member. In those situations where we unfortunately do have unregistered coaches, and they're not even necessarily, when I say unregistered, they're not only not registered as coaches, they're not registered with the SAEF.
Yeah, not even as members, yeah.
What can happen there?
Look, we are not a criminal court in any case, so we can't make a decision. We don't have jurisdiction over that. We can engage, and because we are safeguarding, we obviously will make what effort we can in terms of protecting if there is a situation where it's one of our members. It is specifically our mandate, as I said in the beginning, in terms of law, isn't specifically in the equestrian community. So we would try and regulate this within the equestrian community, but obviously if we come to hear from something that we know could be taken up, whoever that person is connected, to some kind of other structure. So we may be, whether it's an employee of somewhere and we can approach an employer, or whether it's a criminal matter that we refer to the police, we would definitely do it. And by law, we are obligated to, if we know from bullying and harassment of children, we have to report that criminally with the police. So if there's physical and sexual abuse, of course, we have to do that. So there are other avenues. Unfortunately, we don't have the teeth to enforce the equestrian sanctions.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll try and.
I suppose that's also an incentive to choose a coach or an ecosystem that is
exactly.
And we would recommend it that that's a situation that we don't have jurisdiction over somebody, that we would say you can take the civil route. You can go to attorney, go to the police, lay a case if you need to. There are routes available for them to do it. It just might not necessarily be through us.
Okay, but you can provide them the guidance to do that. How does SAEF ensure that investigations remain impartial?
It's a small community.
That is.
I'm going to say that because, and a lot of people are across the disciplines, they're not necessarily the one. We try very hard to keep as confidential as possible, and which is why our case management team is quite small. For that particular reason, that when we discuss it, I certainly don't discuss it amongst everybody, because we just don't know who else might be in the office or whatever it might be. So we try to keep it as confidential as possible, particularly when there's a minor involved. In fact, we have to. But for the same reason, until we've got all the information, it can be defamation to somebody, that there's an accusation made against them that people start talking about because they've heard of it. And then it turns out
their support, it affects them.
Correct. It can affect their income, can affect a number of things if they're coaching or whatever. So we try very hard to keep that in mind when people are doing it. Unfortunately, we do have people who seem to know about things before sometimes we do, and they've talked about it. And that for me is always a concern. And then somebody will add their input and it's their spin on it. And it does, we try to be very careful. We try and be as confidential as we can.
From our side, it's never one person making a decision, So that's also why it's impartial, because it's never Kathy or I or Mariette making the decision. It is, we will make recommendations, and it would be referred to, in this case, to the JC, in any case, that will again provide the person who the allegations is made with an opportunity you know. So there is definitely impartiality in that. Nobody is, it's not a witch hunt. And we like Kathy said, we're really aware of that, not to make that, because it can damage somebody's reputation very quickly.
Can I ask if there is a clear outcome, and there is, the party has gone through the JSE protocol now, and they've been found to be guilty, is there like an offenders registry? Besides the fact that they've been banned, while it is a small community, it's also quite a big community, and there's a lot of, how does a parent looking for a coach know that they're approaching a coach that is just not disclosing that information with them? Yeah.
So we are in the process of looking at putting these things online. If you look at what the FEI do, they post everything. You can go to the FEI website internationally, 100% transparency. We're going to be following the exact same route.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So we're going to be putting
out to SAEF.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is something that we're not there yet to be. It is a bit of a process that we're doing, but we are following the guidelines given by the FEI, and we will be doing the same.
Okay, fantastic. What are the potential legal consequences for false or malicious reporting?
I think it depends from case to case, but again, it's a violation of the policy itself. So in that case, all the normal sanctions that comes into play when there's a violation of the SAEF policies, we probably take into account, like a fine or whatever, a suspension, or it depends on the severity, obviously, of the issue and the intention thereof. But it certainly is a violation of the policy, and it's sanctionable. Yeah.
We have briefly touched on educational measures in places for coaches, officials, and volunteers. Who are the people that should be looking at attending these safeguarding courses? Should it be everyone? Obviously, you have your safeguarding officers that we would like to make a call to action for more people to put their names in the hat for that. But coaches should be attending training, yard owners, parents.
Yes.
Okay.
Parents, definitely.
Perhaps rolling it out through like at Sanisa.
So currently, the Guardian offer a short course. It's 150 Rand. It's 2 to 3 hours of your time done online. And I would highly recommend for anybody that's involved in the sport, be it a rider, a parent, an official, if they're not involved directly with safeguarding, to go and do that course with the Guardian. And
interesting to make that while you do your code of conduct, that it becomes a mandatory.
That it's a very small outlay. It's a small amount of your time, but it gives a very good understanding of what it is. So we are going to be starting to push that out quite hard. At the moment, we're doing it with some of the disciplines and saying, get your members to be better educated. Ultimately, I'd like every club to have a safeguarding officer, every discipline and every province, because it's not a huge expense to go and do it. But the amount of education that's there, because that's where it will start. And then
it's the load.
Yes. So it's not pushing it down necessarily, but we can bring it from the bottom up.
Are safeguarding affidavits or declarations mandatory?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd say yes, they have to do an affidavit. Because we don't want it of, I just don't like you today, and I'm going to come and say, and I say spread rumours. If you prepare to put it on paper and put it in writing to us, then it is something more serious. It's the same as going online. If you're not prepared to put it on a billboard, don't say it online. It's the same principle. If you want to do it as a safeguarding case, are you prepared to put it in writing? So in my opinion, I always say to them, I want an affidavit.
Yeah, technically, just to lodge a complaint, it would probably not be necessary. But as Kathy was saying, is as soon as, and you were saying earlier, as soon as you want to investigate it and prosecute that, you'd have to have something that's legally binding and that somebody was saying under oath that this is my testimony. Otherwise, you sort of can't use it as evidence.
And it is to try and stop that spat that might be happening between two people. And they've just decided, no, I'm going to go lodge a case with SAEF. If you're prepared to put yourself down and put it in writing, then it may be a more serious case.
Off the back of the Guardian course, are there any other resources for parents? And I would say coaches as well, because coaches often invigilate groups of kids, with these dynamics. Are there any other educational resources for them to identify signs of grooming?
Definitely. If the FEI has a wonderful resource available specifically for safeguarding and education, and it's free. They can go
On the FEI campus?
Yes, they can go, and all you need to do is register. And then you've got access to the information that's there. We will be looking at, we are planning to have a lot of that information available to people. And I'd say
Maybe we can even share in this podcast on YouTube, we can share that Guardian course and the FEI campus course. Fantastic.
And just the policy, you know, I just think people should make themselves familiar with the policy on the SAEF
It's very
website.
easy to click the, yes, I've read the
consent,
Yes.
absolutely. Harry, did I get the entry? Yes, I've got it, it's fine, I'm moving on. Yeah. Especially for parents. You know, parents are, if you look at schools, they are very, very careful about sending an all-girls team off to play a sport, and they don't send just the male coach. There will have to be a female teacher involved in something like that. And the same question I say to parents, do you leave your child at the yard for hours at a time with people you would think that you know, and are you quite comfortable leaving your minor child there and just assuming everything's going to be fine? It may not be the coach, it might be somebody else at the yard, but people get very comfortable in an environment they go to all the time. So they think it's a safe space, and it might not be the coach, it might be somebody else. You know, just stop and think about it.
What role do clubs and provincial bodies play in strengthening the safeguarding culture?
As I said, we'd ultimately like a safeguarding officer in all of those bodies, be it the clubs, be it the provincial level, so people can be educated. You know, we have new people joining the sport all the time, but even people who've been here for a long time sometimes don't always know enough about it.
All the processes.
All the processes. And the fact is, it's, you know, we don't want safeguarding to be seen as this big stick kind of approach of, you know, we're here to sort out the problems, because that
fuzzy warm stick.
It just, at the end of the day, it's there to help people, but it is about education, and education is key in this situation. Knowing what it is, how to be able to access it. I mean, I get a number of people phoning me and saying, well, I think this is a safeguarding case because it may be very uncomfortable. Is this? And we'll have a discussion around it and ask them to put it in writing, and we'll investigate.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What does, for both of you, a successful safeguarding culture look like in the South African Equestrian Federation sports, not only now, but over the next 5 years?
I think for me, the important thing is that people be aware of what is best practices and what are poor practices, and that the community in itself would be able to educate itself. You know, if everybody, like we've just said, everybody is aware of the policy, and the idea of the policy being something of a mechanism to resolve disputes or thrown out the window, and people can see what it is actually supposed to be in protecting and creating a safe environment for everybody in the Equestrian Federation and the equestrian community. If we can create that, if we could create parents and pupils that could say to a coach, you know, I don't think I should be alone with you at this time. I don't think it's appropriate for me to play games or alcohol. And just that awareness is, you know, because we all, like you say, young and impressionable. It's difficult to imagine that would come from the child or the young adult, but it needs to. It needs to be a awareness of that things can go south if we're not watching out. And it's for both sides.
Empowered.
Yes.
It's empowerment. I think that's really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for our adult riders, at all levels, be it whether they're still coaches, or they also have a responsibility back to the younger riders coming through in terms of how they behave, how they say things, how they do things. There's a responsibility in sport. That's just what it is. If you're doing this professionally, you absolutely have a responsibility in terms of setting the tone, what is correct and what's for the next level coming through. And it's, again, it comes down to cyberbullying. In the next 5 years, I would love to never get a case around cyberbullying. But that is the majority of my mails every day that come in with the complaints. It's around that. For me, it's incredibly sad to see how social media, as lovely as it can be in a lot of things, has a very cruel side to it. And ultimately, I'd like to see that people better educated on not doing that.
I think we're going to need to get Emma to come back for another. You wanted to speak a little bit more about the cyberbullying, Kathy. Do you think that the responsibility, especially in a teen space, lies with the teens understanding the ramifications thereof, or the parents being able to invigilate what their teens are doing online?
Both. and coaches. And I think it's important that coaches also understand how the cyberbullying can occur. All kids at all schools in this country are educated about cyberbullying. Emma will tell you that it doesn't matter what it does, it's not just the private schools giving education to kids. All schools are being educated of what's acceptable, what's not. The kids know, they forget in the moment. You know, and I say that honestly because I've seen it where I see things, or speak to the parents involved, and the parents will go, I spoke to them, and in the moment she just didn't realize what she was doing.
I just think, we all grew up without smartphones, thank God. If I
100%.
think about what's
The pressure's hard
what
for
we
kids.
did in our youth, but there was no camera there to catch
No,
it or with
no record. And that's why I am sympathetic to teenagers. I think they have it quite hard because
It's a very different environment now.
100%, there's people they're riding and now they're conscious of, is somebody filming me or commenting on the way I ride or my kit or, on my horse, and all of this stuff is going on in their head, and which is why I say again, collectively, it takes a village, and it's the coach, the parent, the child. And I think it altogether needs to be spoken about and openly of what's acceptable, what's not. No, it's not kind to say to somebody, all the gear and no idea. No, it's not, actually.
Someone said that to my very affluent boyfriend recently, and I thought that was hysterical. He's 50.
It's relevant. When you're 15, it can break the child. That's the difference. And the thing is that they're saying, but I didn't use her name. Yeah. Well, you posted a photo of her riding, and it's, that kind of thing, it's hard for the teenagers. It's tough. I think that social media adds a lot of pressure. And that's why I say collectively, I think it's coaches need to be aware, parents need to be aware, the kids need to be aware. When we ran the Emma Sadler workshop last year, we didn't have enough kids on it that we had lots of parents and lots of coaches. But we definitely would like to see more of the kids involved, understanding it. And I know she goes to all the schools and all the schools talk about it, but in the moment, they've got, they want to get the likes, they want to get the followers on their social media, and they want, to be the one on TikTok that everybody's looking at, and they forget, and they say things that are just unkind. And that is bullying. And when it's done over a period of time, they don't actually realize what they're doing.
And there's long-reaching ramifications for that.
Yeah, definitely.
What reassurance can you offer members who feel intimidated by the reporting process?
So if they don't want to go the guardian route, as I said, they can speak to us in person. They can go through their discipline if they want to. They don't have to necessarily come to us. If they are feeling daunted or they feel that they're not being heard, I think it's important that we know about that, because we don't want to be in that situation. We want people to feel that there's there are channels for them to do it. So whether it's through the guardian, whether it's done online, whether they go through their discipline or through the athlete's rep even, and say, well, you're my athlete's rep and I'd like you to be able to assist me to do it. We are open to any of that. It doesn't have to come from the person. The biggest thing we'll look at is it factual? So we don't want it to be that people feel daunted by any of the situations.
If we've got young riders who are listening to this and they're unsure whether something they've experienced qualifies as a safeguarding concern, what would you like them to know?
Send it through to us. We will evaluate it. We will look at it and we can come back and say, yes, absolutely it is, or no, it's not. It's very hard to know and to be able to act on something if we don't know all the details. And that's why when we do get situations like that, we do get the parents involved. If they're minors, we have to. We don't deal with minors directly. I'll always try and deal with either their coaches, parents, guardians, whoever it might be, that they're doing it. And we will investigate if they're having a look at it. And my experience has been when we approach the parents, they don't even know it's happening. They're unaware, sadly. Or they all say, I thought something was happening, she's not been, or he's not been quite himself, or they've stopped riding, or, and I would say the same to coaches. Be aware of a change of behavior. Be aware of the kids maybe, who might have been chatty and talkative in a class, now they're not, or not wanting to ride, or not wanting to come to lessons, or not wanting to compete. Be aware of that, because often at the shows, parents leave all the kids with a coach and off they go, and sometimes that's when it's happening.
It's incredible. There's so much more to worry about now than, as
Look, I mean, it's not happening at every show, and it's not happening amongst every kid. There are isolated instances, but it is there, and we don't I wouldn't want anybody to feel that they couldn't ride or couldn't be enjoying the sport for whatever reason because of that.
They were talking about equine welfare, specifically, with horses, and saying there seems to be such an uptick of abuse. And someone replied, and I thought it was a really pertinent thing, saying, no, nothing's changed, we're just recording it more.
Seeing it more, yes. Yeah.
And social media has changed that. At shows, at yards,
Politics.
people video. They video each other. They video. Suddenly that everything's been recorded. Everything. It's very unlikely something is not being recorded, and how it's used is what's important. But they all want to put it on their social media. The disciplines want to use it for promotions, whatever it might be. So everything is being recorded, which does add a bit more pressure.
And may I say, because maybe we should say it here, because it is something that we get regularly also as a safeguarding concern, the recording of people at shows and the recording, taking photos and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure you dealt it with Emma Sadler as well. But I mean, once you're in the public domain, it's not going to be wrong from someone. It's not a violation of the Poppy Act of someone taking a video of you riding your horse, or taking a video and sending it into SAEF because of a welfare issue or a safeguarding issue, or taking a video of a coach and an interaction between a coach and a pupil or what. That's not a violation of the Poppy Act. So people are concerned and said that we are not allowed to, you're not allowed to record somebody at all.
You are.
And that's not true. So it's just it's a false understanding or a misinterpretation.
What do you do with that information?
So no, we welcome that, and we would like people to send that. And if there's on the welfare side, the horse welfare side, as well as safeguarding.
Fantastic. Is there anything that either of you would like to add to the discussion before we close off?
We've covered all areas sufficiently.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of From the Horse's Mouth, the South African Equestrian Federation's podcast, bringing clarity to conversations within our sport. This is the second safeguarding podcast that we have done. The initial one was about the Guardian app rollout. That was an earlier episode that you can find. And on the topic of bullying, please do find the episode with Emma Sadler, which discusses this topic extensively. We are looking forward to interviewing Chad Cunningham about the Coach the Coaches course, which will be covering another important element of this holistic network, which is our coach development program. And we hope that you tune in for the next episode soon. Thank you for joining us.